With the kind permission of the Honorable Chairperson, deviations from debates and discussions have seemingly become a hallmark of the times we live in. If I may take the liberty of saying so, Honorable Chairperson, so far as the proposition is concerned, this debate seems to be no different. In more ways than one, they argue that art affects society, threatens us. It may or it may not. But the limited question we must answer today is whether art is affected, positively or negatively, by the presence or the absence of limitations. Honorable Chairperson, with the motion of this debate in mind, I rise to espouse the cause of art and artists. I rise to firmly oppose the motion that the biggest threat to art is the absence of limitation. Honorable Chair, today it is my case that the very idea of art is that it exists to transcend the boundaries and limitations which hamper our daily lives. It is my case that the external limitations upon art only propel it further. It is my case that for argument's sake, if there are any threats, they are upon art from fringe elements in extra-constitutional bodies and not from art itself, as the proposition has argued. Honorable Chair, art for art's sake is the basic tenet of aestheticism. Art exists as an object of beauty. To mold that existence into one which is pleasing or even acceptable to a group of people would be to limit the scope and reach of art itself. As Gustav Flaubert famously said, in the world of art, everything is possible. Art is a zone of free play in which ideas, concerns, joys and sorrows of a community can be considered in the safety without practical ramifications. Honorable Chairperson, we have a responsibility, and it is incumbent upon us as a society and community of learners and intellectuals to ensure that art is not confused with politics, law, emotions, science, or business. Honorable Chair, while attempts have been, are being, and will continue to be made to limit art, the fact remains that the suppression of one piece of art gives rise and birth to hundreds of others. Be it the condemnation of the God of small things, which gave us the ministry of utmost happiness, or the film Lipstick Under My Burqa, which won 11 international awards at 35 international film festivals before being considered safe for screening in India. Be it Asim Trivedi's political cartoons, which after being banned won him the Courage in Editorial Cartooning Award, or the suppression of Bashar Pir's famous novel, The Curfewed Nights, which gave us the blockbuster Heather, or the midnight crackdown on literature in the emergency of 1975, which gave us Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children, or the censorship in 2015, which inspired the doubling of such artworks which faced censorship in 2016. Honorable Chairperson, art is like a spring which will retaliate and stretch farther when compressed. Honorable Chairperson, despite innumerable attempts to confine art, rest assured that it will, in one way or the other, find its audience. In conclusion, Honorable Chairperson, it was the failure of the 16th century European empires to limit art that allowed the spread of radical ideas of liberty, equality, fraternity, and inspired the French Revolution. When the French broke the Bastille prisons, they didn't free themselves, they freed art. And Rousseau's poetry declared limitations as incapable and inefficient. Honorable Chairperson, those very ideas today form the bedrock of 21st century democracies. Closer home, despite the limitations of patriarchy, it could not prevent the conception of the Indian nation as the great and all-giving mother, the Bharat Mata, and not as the Bharat Dev, for example. Thus, in the name of this, that, and every other art, I urge you to reject this motion. Thank you.
The total time taken by the participant is 4 minutes, 4 seconds. The House is now open for interjection.
I am 21A. So I would now like to ask you, since you said that even acceptability should not be a limit to art. So if someone depicts their art by sketching or drawing the national flag on the footwear, do you think it is acceptable?
With the kind permission of the Honorable Chair, The question raised is whether any description of national emblems and symbols, and I'll take that more generally than the question has described. The question today, Honorable Chairperson, and the mistake that is being made in the definition of limitation. Limitation in itself, inherently, art considers itself that it does not have limitations. Those limitations which are prescribed in the form of reasonable restriction in the Constitution of India are considered as inherent. The limitations which this motion talks about are limitations which are forced upon art and artists, wherein they are asked to be banned and told to not be displayed, for example. For example, the Chief Justice of India has recently said that if you don't want to watch a particular film, you don't. In that particular case, the question that the proponent has asked comes within those reasonable restrictions and does not fall within the conception and definition of limitation as considered by this debate. And that is why we must stick to the definition of limitation, the conception of the limitation, because if that question is to be considered, then that is a slippery slope which leads us to have no opposition to this particular motion, and that cannot be considered.